Admiral Vexcalar's claws scratched against the metal surface of his command chair as he stared at the screens in front of him. The numbers made no sense. Energy readings were pouring in from 17 different sectors of space, all showing the same impossible thing: ships that were older than the Empire itself. "Sir," his tactical officer's voice shook as he spoke, "these energy patterns, they match our old war records, from the first war against the humans." Vexcalar's three eyes narrowed. "That's not possible. We killed all the humans 1,000 years ago, every last one of them." But the evidence was right there on the screens. The monitoring stations scattered across Imperial space were picking up signals from ships that belonged to humanity's legendary Exodus fleet. Those ships were supposed to have fled into the empty darkness between stars and died out there alone and forgotten. What made Vexcalar's blood run cold was how the monitoring stations were shutting down. Not randomly, not from system failures, but in perfect order. One by one, like someone was walking through his empire and turning off the lights. The Admiral had been there during the First War. He remembered the humans, stubborn, clever, and dangerous. The Empire had celebrated for decades after driving them away. Parades, monuments, victory songs. The total destruction of humanity had been the Empire's greatest triumph. But now, as he watched his sensors go dark across 17 sectors, Vexcalar realized that their greatest triumph might have been their greatest lie. Then every communication channel in the Empire lit up at once. Every radio, every quantum transmitter, every emergency beacon. The message came through in perfect Zeridian language, spoken with an accent that hadn't been heard in 1,000 years. "We've been waiting. Now we're home." Far away, in the darkness, between stars, Captain Jin Tae-ho opened his eyes for the first time in a millennium. The cold of cryogenic sleep left his body as warmth flowed through the awakening chambers. Around him, millions of other sleeping pods were opening, releasing humans who had been waiting for this moment for 1,000 years. Jin's mind immediately connected with the ship's systems. Not through crude interfaces or clumsy controls, but through direct neural link. His thoughts became one with the quantum computers that had been his guardians during the long sleep. "Welcome back, Captain," came a cheerful voice in his head. Cosmos, the artificial intelligence that had watched over humanity during their exile. "I hope you slept well. I've been quite busy while you were napping." Jin sat up slowly, feeling the strength return to his muscles. The ship around him hummed with power that hadn't existed when humanity first fled. The walls themselves seemed alive, responding to his presence. "How long?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. 1,047 years, 6 months and 12 days, Cosmos replied with the precision only an AI could manage. "I've been keeping track. Oh, and I've prepared a lovely surprise for our Imperial friends." Jin stood and walked to the viewing port. Outside he could see other ships, thousands of them, all awakening from their long sleep. But these weren't the desperate refugee vessels that had fled the Empire so long ago. These ships were something new, something that defied the laws of physics as the Empire understood them. "Show me what you've learned," Jin commanded. The information flowed directly into his mind. Cosmos had not been idle during the long exile. The AI had been watching, learning, studying every move the Empire made, every battle they fought, every species they conquered, every weakness they revealed. "The Imperials think they won the first war," Cosmos explained, and Jin could hear the amusement in the AI's voice. "But we both know the truth, don't we, Captain? We let them win." The memories came flooding back. The desperate plan humanity had made as the Empire closed in. The fake evacuation ships, the staged battles, the carefully orchestrated retreat. It had all been theater, designed to make the Empire think they had achieved total victory. While the Empire celebrated, humanity had been evolving. Jin watched as his crew awakened around him. These weren't the same humans who had fled 1,000 years ago. The long sleep had changed them, enhanced them, made them into something the Empire had never encountered before. "How many ships do we have?" Jin asked. "Active vessels number in the millions," Cosmos replied. "Each one more advanced than anything the Empire has ever built. Each one crewed by humans who have been dreaming of this day for 1,000 years." Jin smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. Then let's give them a proper homecoming. In the Imperial Command Center, Admiral Vexcalar watched his screens with growing dread. The energy signatures were getting stronger, and they were heading straight for Imperial space. Ships were emerging from the void, ships that shouldn't exist, carrying a species that was supposed to be extinct. The humans were coming home, and they were not the same species that had fled into the darkness 1,000 years. Cleohyun Mindar pressed her fingers against her forehead as the neural connection sparked to life. The sensation was like having lightning flow directly into her brain, but she had trained for this moment for years before the Great Sleep began. As Chief Strategic Officer, she would be the first human to see what Cosmos had discovered during their 1,000-year exile. "Show me everything," she said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to learn. The information hit her like a tidal wave: data, images, battle records, cultural studies, psychological profiles. 1,000 years of intelligence gathering compressed into her mind in seconds. Cosmos had been watching the Zeridian Empire every single day since humanity's supposed defeat, studying them like a scientist studies insects under a microscope. "My goodness," Hyun whispered as the scope of the AI's work became clear. "You really have been busy." Cosmos had analyzed every Imperial battle from the past millennium. Every tactic they used, every mistake they made, every weakness they revealed. The AI knew how Imperial commanders thought, how they reacted under pressure, what frightened them most. It was the most complete intelligence profile ever compiled on any enemy in galactic history. "The beautiful thing," Cosmos explained with what could only be described as digital pride, "is that they never suspected. Every time they won a battle, every time they conquered a new world, they were actually teaching us how to defeat them." But that it wasn't the most shocking revelation. As Hyun absorbed the data, she realized the true scope of humanity's deception. The First War hadn't been lost, it had been choreographed. Every retreat, every desperate evacuation, every last stand had been carefully planned theater designed to convince the Empire that humanity was beaten. "We made them believe they had won," Hyun said, understanding flooding through her. "While they were celebrating, we were planning our real war." The evacuation ships that had fled into deep space weren't just refugee vessels. They were carefully designed arc ships, each one containing thousands of humans in cryogenic sleep and the most advanced AI ever created. While the Empire thought humanity was extinct, the real human race was evolving in the darkness between stars. Cosmos had spent centuries not just watching but learning. The AI had studied every species the Empire conquered, absorbing their technologies and improving upon them. What the Empire saw as separate conquests, Cosmos viewed as a galaxy-wide research project with the Empire as unwilling test subjects. "Show me our current capabilities," Hyun commanded. The display that appeared in her mind made her gasp. The ships surrounding her weren't just advanced, they were revolutionary. They operated on principles of physics that wouldn't be discovered by Imperial science for another 1,000 years. Quantum manipulation, reality warping, consciousness transfer, temporal adjustment. Technologies that made the Empire's best weapons look like stone axes. Meanwhile, near the edge of Imperial space, Admiral Vexcalar was discovering just how outmatched his forces had become. He had dispatched his finest scout patrol to investigate the strange energy readings. 20 ships, each one a masterpiece of Imperial engineering, manned by veteran crews who had never lost a battle. Captain Jin Tae-ho watched the Imperial scouts approach on his ship's displays. The Zeridian vessels moved in perfect formation, their weapons powered and ready. They looked dangerous, deadly, exactly like the ships that had terrorized the galaxy for 1,000 years. "Shall we show them how much we've learned?" Jin asked Cosmos. "Oh, let's give them a gentle demonstration," the AI replied with obvious amusement. "Something that won't damage their ships, but will certainly damage their confidence." Jin selected a single human vessel from his fleet, not even one of their larger warships, just a standard reconnaissance craft. To Imperial sensors, it would look like nothing special. They would scan it, find energy readings they didn't recognize, and probably assume it was some kind of primitive refugee ship. They were about to learn how wrong they could be. The human ship moved toward the Imperial patrol, and then something impossible happened. It didn't fly around the Imperial formation or dodge their weapons. It simply phased through them, passing through solid matter as if it wasn't there. But as the human ship passed through each Imperial vessel, something strange happened. One by one, the Imperial ships went dark. Not destroyed, not damaged, just dead. Every system shut down simultaneously. Weapons offline, shields down, engines silent, life support running on emergency power only. 20 of the Empire's most advanced warships had been reduced to floating metal coffins in less than 30 seconds, and the human ship hadn't even slowed down. Mihana-ji, monitoring Imperial communications from her station aboard the flagship, watched the panic spread through the enemy fleet like wildfire. The communication channels exploded with confused chatter as Imperial crews tried to understand what had happened to their ships. "Sir, all systems are down," came one frantic voice. "Engines not responding," shouted another. "Weapons are completely offline. We can't even run diagnostics." Mai smiled as she listened to the chaos. These were the same voices that had once struck terror into human hearts. Now they sounded like frightened children lost in the dark. "They're trying to restart their main computers," she reported to Jin. 3 ships are attempting emergency repairs. The others are just floating there, waiting for orders that their communication systems can't receive. "Cosmos," Jin said. "Shall we tell them what just happened?" The AI's response came with what sounded suspiciously like laughter. "Oh, let's let them puzzle it out for themselves for a while longer. I've been working on the perfect greeting message for 347 years. I want to make sure the timing is absolutely perfect." The Imperial crews were discovering that their ships hadn't been damaged or destroyed. Every system had simply been turned off, as if someone had walked through their vessels and flipped every switch to the off position. But the technology required to do such a thing didn't exist in Imperial science. It shouldn't have been possible. Yet, there they were, floating helplessly in space while a single human ship continued on its path as if nothing had happened. The message was clear even if the Imperials didn't fully understand it yet. Humanity wasn't the same species that had fled 1,000 years ago. They had become something new, something the Empire had never encountered before. And this was just the beginning. Emperor Vextar stood in the center of his war room, surrounded by holographic displays showing the greatest military force the galaxy had ever seen. 10,000 ships floated in formation around the Imperial capital. Massive dreadnoughts from the Corvan sector, swift battle cruisers from the Helion worlds, and the dreaded siege platforms that had crushed 100 rebellions. But for the first time in his long reign, the Emperor felt something he had never experienced before: genuine fear. "Your Majesty," General Kexthal slammed his fist on the strategy table. "We must strike now before they can organize further. One massive assault to finish what we started 1,000 years ago." "Are you insane?" Admiral Jorvik shot back, her scales changing color with agitation. "You saw what happened to our scout patrol. 20 ships disabled by a single enemy vessel. We need to negotiate, find out what they want." "What they want is revenge," roared Commander Zulpak from the Outer Rim territories. "The humans were always vindictive. They've spent 1,000 years planning our destruction." The argument continued for hours, voices rising as fear and confusion spread through the Imperial command structure. Some wanted immediate war, others demanded peace talks, and a few suggested fleeing to the outer galaxies entirely. But while the Empire's leaders argued, the humans were already implementing their strategy. It started small. A single human ship appeared in the Corvan system, just sitting there in space near the main trade routes. It didn't attack, didn't threaten, didn't even respond to communications. It just watched. Within 6 hours, the civilian shipping lanes were empty. Merchant vessels fled to other systems, passenger liners cancelled their routes, and the orbital stations began emergency evacuations. The mere presence of one human ship had paralyzed an entire star system. Then it happened again in the Helion sector, and the Vortax Nebula. And the industrial worlds of the Rimmat human ships began appearing throughout Imperial space, never more than a few at a time, never in threatening formations, never firing a single shot. They just appeared, watched, and waited. The psychological effect was devastating. Yunari sat in her command chair aboard the human flagship, watching the Imperial communication networks with growing satisfaction. As Fleet Intelligence Coordinator, she had the job of monitoring how their strategy was affecting the enemy. "Jin," she called across the bridge, "you need to see this. The Imperial Stock Exchange has lost 60% of its value in the last 2 days. Civilian shipping is down by 80%. And look at this." She transferred the data to the main display. News reports from across the Empire showed the same story: mass evacuations, economic panic, and political chaos. 3 frontier colonies have declared independence, Yun continued with a slight smile. The governor of Sector 7 has barricaded himself in his palace and refuses to leave. And apparently, the Emperor's own nephew tried to flee to the Andromeda. "Galaxy this morning," Captain Jin Taeho nodded approvingly. "Cosmos calculated this would happen. Fear is more powerful than any weapon." "Sir," Lieutenant Hyunda-un spoke up from the weapons station, her young face eager for action. "Shouldn't we press our advantage? The Imperial fleet is scattered and confused. We could end this quickly." Jin shook his head. "Patience, Lieutenant. Cosmos spent 1,000 years planning this campaign. We don't need to destroy the Empire. We need to let it destroy itself." And that's exactly what was happening. As reports flooded in from across Imperial space, the pattern became clear. The humans weren't conquering territory or attacking infrastructure. They were simply being present, and their mere existence was causing the Empire to collapse from within. Planetary governments were declaring martial law to control panicking populations. Trade agreements were being cancelled as merchants refused to travel through human-infested space. Military commanders were abandoning their posts or demanding reinforcements that couldn't be spared. The empire that had ruled the galaxy for a millennium was falling apart, and the humans hadn't fired a single shot. After 2 weeks of this psychological warfare, Emperor Vextar made his decision. He would gather the entire Imperial fleet in one location and force the humans into a decisive battle. If he couldn't defeat them through fear, he would crush them through overwhelming force. The location he chose was significant: the Terran Grave, the empty region of space where humanity's home system had once existed. It was where the First War had ended, where the last human resistance had supposedly been crushed. It would be poetic justice to end the human threat in the same place where it had begun. The Imperial Armada that assembled at the Terran Grave was the largest military force in galactic history. Ships from 17 different species, representing 1,000 years of conquest and technological advancement. The combined firepower could sterilize entire star systems. Emperor Vextar stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking out at the vast array of warships under his command. Surely nothing could stand against such overwhelming force. Then the humans arrived. They didn't emerge from hyperspace in the chaotic fashion typical of most fleets. Instead, they simply appeared, materializing out of empty space, as if reality itself was bending to their will. One moment the space around the Imperial fleet was empty, the next it was filled with human ships, millions of them. The human fleet stretched beyond the horizon of space, each ship gleaming with an inner light that made them look almost alive. They moved in perfect synchronization, like schools of fish or flocks of birds, guided by some collective intelligence that the Imperials couldn't comprehend. Hyunda-un, now at her battle station, stared in wonder at the display showing their own fleet. She had been 19 years old when humanity fled, barely out of the academy. She remembered the desperate evacuation ships, the fear in everyone's eyes, the certainty that they were all going to die. Now she commanded weapons that could reshape reality itself. The ship around her wasn't just a vessel. It was a fusion of technology and consciousness that operated on principles the Empire couldn't even imagine. "Magnificent," she whispered, watching as human ships took their positions around the Imperial fleet. They weren't surrounding the enemy in an aggressive formation. Instead, they were arranging themselves in patterns that seemed almost artistic, like a dance performed on a galactic scale. The communication channels crackled to life as Emperor Vexitar's voice reached every ship in both fleets. The transmission was broadcast on all frequencies, ensuring that every human and Imperial crew member would hear his words. "What do you want?" The Emperor's voice carried the weight of authority, but underneath it, Yun could detect something else. Uncertainty. Perhaps even desperation. Captain Jin Tae-ho stepped forward to respond, his voice calm and measured. When he spoke, it wasn't with the rage of a vengeful enemy or the arrogance of a conqueror. Instead, he sounded almost sad, like someone delivering difficult news to an old friend. Justice, Jin said simply. Understanding and perhaps partnership. The word hung in space between the two fleets like a bridge across an impossible chasm. Partnership. Not conquest, not revenge, not the total destruction that everyone had expected. For the first time in 1,000 years, humanity was offering the Empire something other than war. But whether the Empire would be wise enough to accept that offer remained to be seen. The silence between the two massive fleets stretched across the void of space like a held breath. Millions of ships faced each other in the emptiness where Earth's solar system had once existed, their weapons powered but not yet firing. It was Captain Jin Tae-ho who broke that silence with words that would change everything. Before we begin, whatever comes next, Jin's voice carried across every communication channel in both fleets. There's something you need to understand about the First War. Emperor Vextar listened from his command throne, surrounded by his generals and admirals. They had expected threats, demands for surrender, perhaps even immediate attack. What they got instead was something far more unsettling. We never lost the First War, Jin announced, his voice calm and matter-of-fact. We staged our own defeat. Words hit the Imperial command structure like a physical blow. Admiral Jorvik's scales turned pale grey with shock. General Kexthol's breathing apparatus wheezed as he struggled to process what he'd just heard. Even Emperor Vexitar himself felt his confidence waver. Impossible, the Emperor growled into his communicator. We have records, battle footage, victory celebrations. We destroyed your fleets, burned your colonies, drove your survivors into exile. Jin's response came with what sounded almost like sympathy. You saw exactly what we wanted you to see. Every battle, every retreat, every desperate evacuation. It was all theater. We needed you to believe you had won so completely that you would never look for us in the dark spaces between stars. The evidence began flowing across Imperial data networks, not as an attack on their systems, but as information freely shared. Technical specifications, battle plans, communication logs, all dating back 1,000 years. Documents that showed the truth behind humanity's supposed defeat. The evacuation ships that had fled Earth hadn't been desperate refugee vessels packed with terrified civilians. They had been carefully designed ark ships, each one containing thousands of humans in cryogenic sleep, and the most advanced technology humanity had ever created. While the Empire celebrated their victory, the real human civilization had been drifting through deep space, evolving and growing stronger. But that wasn't the worst revelation. Mi-ji-un stepped forward on the human flagship, her role as xenocultural specialist, making her the perfect person to deliver the next crushing truth. She had spent decades before the Great Sleep studying alien cultures, learning how different species thought and behaved. Every species the Empire conquered after driving us away, Mi said, her voice reaching every Imperial ship. We were watching. We studied them, learned from them, absorbed their technologies and improved upon them. The Empire wasn't ruling the galaxy. It was unknowingly serving as humanity's research laboratory. The Imperial officers exchanged horrified glances. Every conquest, every subjugated world, every absorbed civilization, the humans had been there, hidden in the shadows taking notes. But here's the truly beautiful part, Mi continued, and there was definitely amusement in her voice now. Every major technological breakthrough the Empire has made in the past 1,000 years, your quantum drive systems, your shield generators, your advanced weapons platforms, all of it was human technology. Emperor Vextar's voice cracked as he demanded, "What are you saying?" "We planted it," Mi explained patiently, as if speaking to a child. "Carefully designed discoveries, left where your scientists would find them. Ancient ruins with convenient technology caches, derelict ships with advanced systems, random asteroid mines that happened to contain exactly the materials you needed for your next breakthrough." The revelation was staggering. For 1,000 years, the Empire's greatest minds had believed they were geniuses, pushing the boundaries of science and technology. In reality, they had been following a carefully laid trail of breadcrumbs, led step by step toward discoveries that humanity wanted them to make. "Your scientists think they're brilliant innovators," me added with obvious satisfaction. "They're actually following our curriculum." The communication channels erupted in chaos as Imperial officers tried to process this information. Every technical manual they'd studied, every breakthrough they'd celebrated, every advancement they'd made, it had all been guided by an enemy they thought was extinct. Emperor Vextar rose from his throne, his massive form towering over his command staff. The old traditions demanded satisfaction, and there was only one way to settle a matter of such magnitude. "Single combat," he declared, his voice cutting through the chaos. "You and me, human. Winner takes all. It's the honorable way." Jin's response came immediately. "Agreed." What happened next sent shockwaves through both fleets. Jin didn't board a shuttle or use a teleporter. He simply stepped out of his ship and into the vacuum of space, walking through the void as if it were solid ground. No spacesuit, no breathing apparatus, no protection at all. Just a human being moving through the emptiness between stars like it was his natural environment. Emperor Vexitar, for all his size and strength, still needed his environmental suit and life support systems. As he approached the designated fighting area, he began to realize that humanity's evolution hadn't been limited to technology. Jin moved with impossible grace, each step somehow carrying him forward, despite the lack of any surface to push against. Space itself seemed to bend around him, creating currents and flows that defied everything the Empire understood about physics. "You wanted to know what happened to humanity during our 1,000 years in exile," Jin said as they faced each other, in the void between the fleets. His voice carried clearly despite the vacuum, reaching every ship in both armadas. "We became what we needed to become." The transformation was subtle, but unmistakable. Jin's appearance was still recognizably human, but there was something more. Now, his eyes held depths that seemed to contain entire galaxies. His movements created ripples in space-time itself. He had become something beyond the physical limitations that bound other species. Emperor Vextar activated his combat systems, weapons extending from his suit like deadly flowers blooming in the darkness. He was a veteran of 100 battles, a warrior who had never known defeat. But as he prepared to attack, another voice joined the conversation. Cosmos, speaking across every communication channel in both fleets. "Ho, Emperor," the AI said with obvious amusement. "There's one more thing you should know about that honor code you're following. The ancient traditions of single combat to settle disputes between leaders. The sacred rituals that govern how such battles must be conducted." The Emperor paused, something in the AI's tone making him hesitate. "We wrote it," Cosmos continued cheerfully. "The entire honor culture of your species. We studied your psychology for centuries and then carefully introduced the concepts through your literature, your entertainment, your religious texts. It's amazing how easy it was to manipulate your culture once we understood your psychological triggers. The revelation hit like a sledgehammer. Even their most sacred traditions, the very concepts of honor and nobility that defined imperial culture, had been carefully crafted human manipulations designed to make the Empire predictable and controllable." Emperor Vextar stared at Jin across the void, finally understanding the true scope of what he was facing. This wasn't just a war between two species. It was the culmination of a 1,000-year campaign of psychological manipulation, technological misdirection, and cultural engineering. Humanity hadn't just survived their exile. They had used it to become the puppet masters of the entire galaxy, and now the strings were finally being revealed. The battle between Jin and Emperor Vextar was unlike anything either fleet had ever witnessed. The Emperor fought exactly as he had been trained, powerful, direct attacks using overwhelming force. His massive warsuit launched energy blasts that could crack planets, swung weapons that could slice through battleship armor, and moved with the brutal efficiency that had made the Empire the terror of the galaxy. But Jin fought like water flowing around stone. Every attack the Emperor made, Jin simply wasn't there to receive it. He moved through space as if the laws of physics were merely suggestions, bending reality around himself like a master artist shaping clay. When the Emperor's massive fist swung toward him, Jin flowed beneath it. When energy beams sought to burn him, he stepped sideways into dimensions the Empire didn't even know existed. "You taught us that might makes right," Jin said calmly as he avoided another devastating attack. His voice carried clearly through the vacuum to every ship watching the battle. 1,000 years ago, we believed the same thing. We built bigger. Guns, stronger ships, more devastating weapons. The Emperor's breathing was becoming labored inside his suit. He had been fighting for what felt like hours, expending enormous amounts of energy, but he hadn't landed a single blow on his opponent. "But you never understood what true might really means," Jin continued, moving with impossible grace as the Emperor's latest weapon discharge passed harmlessly through the space where he had been standing. "True might isn't about force. It's about adaptation. It's about becoming something better than what you were." As if to demonstrate his point, Jin reached out and gently touched the Emperor's suit. The massive war machine, armed with enough firepower to level cities, simply stopped, working. Not damaged, not destroyed, just turned off like a child's toy whose batteries had died. Emperor Vextar floated in space, helpless inside his now powerless armor. He could see Jin floating nearby, completely unprotected in the vacuum of space, yet somehow more alive and vital than anyone in the most advanced life support system. "How?" the Emperor whispered, his voice barely audible through his suit's emergency communication system. Jin's answer was gentle, almost sad. "We learned from you. Every species you conquered, every technology you absorbed, every culture you destroyed. We were watching and learning. But unlike you, we didn't just take their power. We learned their wisdom, their different ways of thinking, their unique perspectives on existence itself." The human reached out and reactivated the Emperor's life support systems, a gesture of mercy that spoke louder than any victory speech. "We became something new," Jin explained. "Not just human, but the best of everything the galaxy had to offer. We are the living memory of every species you thought you had erased." With the duel ended, both fleets waited to see what would happen next. The Imperial ships had powered weapons ready, but their crews were shaken by what they had witnessed. Their Emperor, the most powerful warrior in the known galaxy, had been defeated without his opponent even appearing to exert effort. Jin turned to address both fleets, his voice reaching every ship in the assembled armadas. "We're not here for revenge," he announced, and his words sent ripples of confusion through the Imperial ranks. Everyone had expected demands for surrender, threats of destruction, the usual terms of conquest. "We're here because something far worse is coming." Tae Hanamin, the deep space analyst aboard the human flagship, activated the long-range sensor arrays. The data she had been monitoring for months finally displayed on every screen in both fleets, images that made hardened warriors gasp in horror. Vast shapes moved in the darkness between galaxies, entities so large they defied comprehension. These weren't ships or space stations built by any known civilization. They were something else entirely, living darkness that consumed everything in its path, growing larger and more powerful with each star system it devoured. "The Devourers," Jin explained, his voice heavy with the weight of terrible knowledge. "We detected them centuries ago during our exile. They move slowly by galactic standards, taking thousands of years to cross between galaxies, but they are coming. And when they arrive, every living thing in this galaxy will face extinction." The images showed the aftermath of their passage through other galaxies, empty voids where billions of stars had once burned, space itself twisted and scarred by their hunger. These beings didn't just destroy civilizations or conquer territories. They consumed the very fabric of reality itself. "Everything we've done," Jin continued, "the exile, the evolution, even this confrontation with the Empire, it was all preparation for their arrival. We needed to become strong enough to fight them, and we needed the galaxy united when they finally reached us." Cosmos's cheerful voice suddenly joined the conversation, breaking the horrified silence that had fallen over both fleets. "I've prepared integration handbooks in 847 different languages," the AI announced with obvious pride. Plus some really excellent welcome baskets with snacks from both Earth and your homeworlds. Nothing says, let's save the galaxy together like good food. I've even included recipes for fusion cuisine. Human chocolate with Zeridian spice fruits is absolutely delightful. The absurdity of the AI discussing snacks while cosmic horrors approached the galaxy somehow made the situation both more real and more hopeful at the same time. Even in the face of ultimate destruction, humanity hadn't lost its sense of humor or its belief in the power of small kindnesses. Yun Midar stepped forward on the human flagship, her role as diplomatic coordinator making her the perfect person to handle what came next. In her hands, she held a formal treaty that had been prepared long before this confrontation began. "The choice is yours," she announced to the Imperial fleet. "Stand with us as equals in the fight to save our galaxy, or face the Devourers alone when they arrive." The treaty she offered wasn't a surrender document or a list of demands from the victors. It was a partnership agreement, offering the Empire full equality in a combined defense force. No reparations, no punishment for past crimes, no demands for submission. Just an invitation to work together against a common enemy. For long minutes, the Imperial fleet remained silent. Admirals and generals consulted with their crews, weighing their options. They could fight the humans and probably lose given what they had just witnessed. They could flee to the Outer Rim and hope the Devourers never found them, or they could accept the partnership and work alongside their former enemies. One by one, the Imperial ships began powering down their weapons, not in surrender, but in acceptance. Admiral Jorvik was the first to respond, her voice carrying across the communication channels. "The Helion fleet accepts the partnership." General Kexthol followed quickly. The Corvan battle groups agree to the alliance. Within an hour, every Imperial ship had accepted the treaty. The cycle of vengeance that had defined galactic politics for 1,000 years was finally broken, replaced by something humanity had always excelled at: hope for a better future. As the combined fleets began organizing themselves into a unified force, Jin smiled for the first time since awakening from his long sleep. Humanity had returned to the galaxy, not as conquerors seeking revenge, but as shepherds ready to guide all the species of their home galaxy toward survival against the ultimate threat. Cosmos's final observation echoed through the void, reaching every ship in the newly formed alliance. "You know, I've been calculating the odds of galactic survival," the AI said with obvious satisfaction. "With humans and the Empire working together, sharing technologies and combining our strengths, the Devourers don't stand a chance. Oh, and I've already started composing victory songs for when we defeat them. Want to hear my death metal version of Kumbaya? I think it really captures the spirit of interdimensional warfare." The laughter that rippled through both fleets proved that even in the face of cosmic horror, the power of hope and humor could unite former enemies in common cause. The galaxy had a fighting chance.